Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're doing another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. Today's video we are going to be focusing on the Explore Best of 3 metagame. So we got a bunch of new data that came in from Untapped, looking at the new format, seeing the new Karlov Manor. For Historic, I'm still not getting a lot of data. Not really much is changing in the format right now. It's basically like Wizards, Mono Green, and Blue-White Control. Like a lot of the same decks are still permeating towards the top there. So I'm going to hold off on Historic until we get at least some new data in there to actually warrant a video. And we'll kind of go from there. But we're going to look at Explore. A lot of these decks can port over fairly well to Best of 1 as well. But kind of give you a look with that. I think we still owe you standard Best of 3 this week, so we'll get to that when we can. But as always, Tap GG is where we're getting the data. Link is in the video description if you want to get started with them. Tracks your win rates with other users, gives cool stats. I'll link and timestamp all these videos as well. So looking at popularity of the decks from Diamond and Mythic of the day. As always, popular decks don't necessarily correlate to the highest win rates, but are played for a variety of different reasons. Fun, play style, whatever it may be. Usually folks will kind of tackle it in that manner, but Boros Convoke and Azorius Control kind of spearhead the format, both in the 16% range. Convoke, very popular in Standard. It is very close to the same deck in Pioneer or Explore, but with better mana base, as well as Loxodon in here as well. Azorius Control, another deck that's got a lot of staples from Standard that also find their way into this Explorer version. We have Rakdos Midrange, 11.7%. Abzan Amalia combo at 9%, just a shade under, as well as Izzet Phoenix at 8%. And Mono Green Devotion, we got it showing up again with the new ley line, so we'll take a look at that. We're looking kind of at the trends. We had Azorius peak at about 23, almost 24%, kind of coming down. We're seeing a increase in the number of Convoke players. And Mono Green Devotion at one point was one of the high decks we see before the banning. Was fairly high, actually, that was Amalia. But yeah, still at one point, Mono Green was pretty popular, then it got banned, and now we barely see the deck, but we'll take a look and a stab at it. But we're looking this week, it's going to be fairly small sample sizes of games. You can see from like the population source, only 7,000 matches in the last 14 days from the 6th through the 20th, Diamond and Mythic rank. So smaller populations, focus less on the win rates. We're just going to be looking at the archetypes themselves. These are all reasonable decks that can kind of get you wins and have success in the format. We're going to jump right into it. We have Abzan Amalia combo. So this one's at 79%. Again, small sample size, but this is one of the more powerful decks of the format. For those of you who are unfamiliar, how the combo works is if you have Amalia Benavides, you can cast it with a Wild Growth Walker out, as well as anything that gains you a life on ETB, or something that would subsequently trigger a Explore. So either you cast it with like Luminarch Veteran out, or you have both out and then you cast Sinnoh Scout. This triggers a loop with Amalia and Wild Growth Walker where you keep gaining life in three life increments. This gets to 20 power, and then it kills all the other creatures. You have a creature that kind of attacks there. With Dina out, you basically drain your opponent out from there. Voice of the Blessed can get large enough and become indestructible, so it survives the kind of pseudo board wipe from Amalia. Return to the Ranks can rebuy you your creatures, and then Extractionist Specialist the same way. Collected Company and Court of Calling both provide some tutoring, kind of find you pieces, some value like that. Notably, if you Selfless Savior the Wild Growth Walker, it will create an infinite loop that you can't get out of because it's not a May ability. So just be mindful of that as you're kind of going through the chain. This deck here didn't really get any new lands. We're seeing a lot of the pain lands. You can probably, over like Deathcap Glade, play more of like the shock lands, I would say. You could probably get away with playing some more of the fast lands as well in lieu of this. So I would just play like the Golgari fast lands in place of this. I'm actually curious if there's another Amalia deck, if this one has better mana. This one's fairly similar. I'm actually going to pull this one up for comparison purposes because the mana base looks pretty tight here. So like the Blooming Marshes, this mana base looks a lot better. A lot of similarities with this list compared to this one. You have the Gilded Goose, Selfless Savior here. This one's a little bit trimmer on that side. You have Kellens in this version. Sentinel, the Nameless City, Skyclave Apparition. This version is with the Aetherflux Reservoir as another win condition as well for the deck. So even if you don't have it immediately, if you have the leftover life gain. And I actually think most of the decks are going towards the Reservoir from what I've seen from Pioneer. So I'll paste both these lists for your consideration if you're interested in kind of going from that avenue. We then go to Boros Convoke at 76%. So a lot, like I said, a lot of cards that you see in Standard, the Gleeful Demolitions, Novice Inspectors, Thraben Inspector, which is basically the same card. Can I copy your homework? Fine, just change it up a bit. Voldaren Epicures, Wardens, the Resolute, Thalia seen playing this format. So this version's all creatures. 3 Immodanes, but you have the Venerated Loxodon that can put a whole bunch of extra power, along with a single copy of Ornithopter. The biggest thing that you get in this deck versus the Standard is good mana base. You have Inspiring Vantage and Sacred Foundry, so just increasing the number of untapped sources of dual colors on turn 1, which is really impactful for the deck itself. Sideboard is Jing Out the Companion, Deafening Silence for any deck that's playing a number of non-creature spells, and particularly looking at you is Izzet Phoenix. Some cheap removal and Torch the Tower that exiles, Cathar Commando for Artifact Enchantment Hate, that can be tutored with the Knight Errant, Get Lost as removal, Rest in Peace for Graveyard Hate, Invasion as a way to hit your, kind of like a Thoughtseize pseudo effect, and then Redain to tax the bigger mana spells, in particular sweepers out of your opponent. Then go to Azorius Control. So there's the Lotus Field version of Azorius, there's this Yorion version. Kind of at the core, though, the same idea. One's trying to go bigger mana, one's just playing like effects like Temporary Lockdown. Personally think Temporary Lockdown's in a better position, while Strict Proctor does stop some elements of the Boros Convoke deck as well. Just kind of gives you some flexibility. This also hits like Oven and stuff like that out of the Sacrifice decks. But just a whole bunch of removal. We're seeing the new counterspell, No More Lies, some Get Lost in there. Spring Verdicts, Wandering Emperor, single copy of Farewell, full Planeswalker Suite to Fairy and Emperor, Shark Typhoon mixed into there. You got your Field of Ruins, your Halls, your Restless Anchorage all being featured in the deck. Yorion, like I mentioned. Then you got just more counter effects, Rest in Peace for Graveyard Hate, Chrome Seed Shark once your opponent takes out most of the removal. This version's also on Regal Caracal. 5 mana, 3/3, makes 2 cats with lifelink, and your other cats get +1/1 and lifelink. So against the more aggressive decks, gives you a way to kind of gain some life back. So you've seen that from time to time out of these blue-white control decks. Moving on, we go to Izzet Phoenix, 73%. Again, smaller sample size. This deck's really just about throwing phoenixes into your yard, either through self-mill, looting with like Ledger Shredder. You have Otherworldly Gaze, you have the Surveil from Consider in here, Sleight of Hand, ways to put it, like key cards into your hand. There's just lots of ways to kind of churn through your deck. Treasure Cruise just draws you a whole bunch of cards as well, for usually 1 mana in this particular deck. In your sideboard, you have Braids, just a bunch of different removals, the Young Pyromancer for if they bring in Graveyard Hate, Anger of the Gods as needed, as well as Brotherhood's End. I've never personally been a fan of Anger of the Gods in the Phoenix deck. Like, you don't care if your Phoenix dies because you can get him back fairly easy, but the Anger kind of screws you over more, I think. Fable, a Crackly Drake, again, just more ways post-board. If they bring in various Graveyard Hate pieces, you can kind of pivot your action and kind of go from there. Then we go to the deck I've been playing in Best of One and kind of playing it a little. It's going to be the one I play for the metagame challenge. I tweaked it a bit just for my liking, but this is Izzet Creativity with the Gearhawk package. So you kind of, early game, you throw away like Magma Opus to make treasures, and then eventually you either Creativity into always hit Torrential Gearhawk to get free Magma Opus. Stern Lesson's really cool in this deck because it lets you draw a discard, but also creates a Power Stone that can either be targeted with Indomitable Creativity, or since the Gearhawk's a artifact, lets you cast it that way there. Another new card from the deck is Deduce. This card's very, very good, just providing you card advantage, but also another way to create a treasure at instant speed. I cut the Sublime Epiphanies. I went up to, I think, a full set of Fables. I trimmed to 3 Creativities and Best of 1. The format's a little bit more aggressive, so I was playing the full Interaction Suite, full Fiery Impulse, full Torch Tower. I don't have an Intrude the Mind, but it's reasonable to me to try this out, kind of new Fact or Fiction style effect in the 5-drop slot. Again, Best of 1 tends to be a little bit more linear, so I wanted to have a little bit more action. Sublime Epiphany to me seems more of a win more card. You're relying on a 6-mana spell while you can copy your Gearhulk and kind of chain off. You're still trying to resolve a 6-mana spell against like Dovin's Veto, stuff of that nature. Like Opus, fine, at least it provides other utility, a ramp, stuff like that, and it's more of a threatening piece. This requires you to have other things in play. I was actually playing 2 Myrex. Originally I was playing the Thundering Falls, the new Surveil land, but I actually just like playing the second Myrex. Against all the control, this card's really good at putting pressure on your opponent. Just a bunch of counters, removal, spells, commence the end game, Shark Typhoon. Personally, I think I prefer when I'm going to be playing best of 3 for the metagame. I'm going to play the 6-mana uncounterable Chandra as opposed to commence the end game. It's too easy for control to kind of answer this. Just having one big creature that just gets swept up anyways by either any of their sweepers, March, which they'll likely keep in for your like small artifact effects, or just the Wandering Emperor, doesn't feel great. Chandra at least kind of put some pressure on it. I was also, like, they're playing Galvanized as an answer to Shieldred. Shieldred's pretty rough for this deck since a lot of your removal deals like 3 to 4 damage, not 5. This requires you to draw a second card for the turn, which kind of plays you further into Shieldred, and you're not always guaranteed to be able to do so. I was just going to play Witchstalker Frenzy. If they attack, get reduced, it's still an instant, so Gearhulk could flash it back. It's a little bit more consistent of a card, I think. But yeah, I have a full video on this. The deck's really fun to play. It's probably the most fun I've had since the new set dropped with any deck. Speaking of creativity, there's another creativity deck. This is calling it 5 color, it's really Jeskai Creativity. So you are going into Atraxa with this deck, same creativity package, similar cards with like Stern Lesson, Deduce, Fable in here. You also have Nahiri the Harbinger that can cheat into play Atraxa, lets you draw discard Teferi, Shark Typhoon, Atraxa is your payoff. You have a Restless Anchorage in the mana base, Myrex in here as well. So just similar elements. This I think is better against like creature decks. Atraxa is better in that regard. Against control, I like the Izzet version better personally, just because you're not as heavily reliant on getting your creature out, and like through creativity, it's very easy to veto it. For example, disrupt it that way, and then Atraxa could just get caught up with a sweeper. Gearhulk provides some value when it comes in. It also can be just played fairly, like turn 5, turn 6, kind of get you some value there. The downside is Gearhulk gets shut off post board again by Graveyard Hate. It could also be Besiege'd, which is something that was kind of funny that came up in one of the games. Your sideboard, this version here gets you some better sideboard options between Veto, Rest in Peace, and Leyline. We have the Ill-Timed Explosion new card. Draw 2, then you may discard 2 cards. When you do, it deals X damage to each creature, where X is the greatest mana value amongst discarded cards. So kind of a cool sweeper idea in the deck to get kind of scales up. Hullbreaker for the kind of control matchups as well. So you're kind of shifting your focus post-board to just more like Jeskai Control. We have Abzan Greasefang, so self-mill over your Parhelions, your Sky Sovereigns, your Esca's Chariot. Greasefang reanimates it. Sentinel of the Lost City is a card being tried out here. Provides you some card advantage. Another thing that can crew a lot of these vehicles, as well as the map tokens, can help you kind of provide some card advantage, clean up the top of your deck. Seeing some copies of Bitter Triumph in here, the Traverse the Uvenwald, Vessel of Nascency kind of package as well. Your sideboard, just Hand Hate, some removal, Ashiok for like tutor effects for Amalia, some Graveyard Hate built in, Callous Blood Mage, Graveyard Hate, just some flexibility there, some more graveyard, just like a lot of ways, different unique ways to hit graveyards. Temporary lockdown for like Convoke and the aggressive decks. Tireless Tracker is more of like a grindy fair value. I opened one of these in draft, like this alt art. It's awesome alt art. Needless to say, I got 7 wins in that draft, thanks to that tireless tracker. And then some Shieldred. So you can kind of shift if they're bringing in a lot of graveyard hate. You drop your top end and you just play like Abzan mid-range kind of value play. Then go to Rakdos Midrange. So this is the version that's starting to incorporate some copies of Inti in the list. We've seen some of these versions also go Smuggler's Copter. Smuggler's Copter and Inti both play fairly well together. Still a little early. There was only one deck that was like a weird Convoke hybrid trying to play Smuggler's Copter, showing up stats. It's like 46% win rate, so I'm not going to show you that. But like hand hates, just a bunch of removal, like kill things, 2 for 1 your opponent to no days end, Kalitas in here, Shieldreds, kind of outgrind your opponent value-wise from there. Your sideboards like hand hate, combo hate, Nykthos hate, hand hating like Exile. Against the Convoke deck, you have Hitotsuku, Liliana for control, Path to Peril, Extinction Event for the more aggressive decks. You may want to look like instead of Extinction Event, start exploring like the new 5-mana sweeper with Collect Evidence could be reasonable. While 1 more mana, it's a clean answer as opposed to Extinction Event, where depending on the matchup, might not answer everything you want. Invoke Despair as well for kind of the grindier matchups. Then go to Mono Green Devotion. So we got Leyline of the Guild Pack. Comes in 4 Devotion that's added, turns all your lands into multicolor. We also have Archdruid's Charm, the new one. So this can tutor your Nykthos, which is nice, or fight a creature or exile artifact or enchantment. You have the previous kind of ramp package, Mystic, Llanowar Elf, Wolf of Lohaven, Kiora, Old Growth Walker, Seed of Hope to kind of help you dig, Dryad's Revival as kind of a flashback, just rebuy effect, Cavalier of Thorns helps you find more lands, Storm the Festival mills you over. In all honesty, Dryad's Revival should just be another Storm the Festival. And then, like, you really should be playing 4 Storm the Festival. You don't have Karn now, but at least 3, I would say, even 4, just to hit, like, your Cavaliers and stuff. And then you're just generating a whole bunch of mana, cast Eldrazi, and kind of go from there. Your sideboards, just like various removal options, needles. It's kind of cool. You have Stomping Grounds in here for this giant Cindermaw Amalia tech. Shut off the life gain from your opponent. Vivian Reed, Artifact Enchantment Hate, and the kind of grind value. Emrakul's take over your opponent's turn, and then where needed against the heavy control meta, you can bring in another Cavern of Souls just to counter. Have like, you have Elf, you could have Troll Warrior, Elemental Knight, Eldrazi, just different ways to kind of prevent your opponent from countering your big payoffs. Then go to 5-color Discover. So this deck here is a Karuga Companion, so you can't play things that are 3 CMC or less. So what you're trying to do with this deck is kind of get around that. So you have things like Beanstalk Giant that lets you ramp for 3, Herd Migration finds you lands, Leyline Bindings, effectively 1 mana removal, Trumpeting Carnosaur can be used as 3 mana removal or a combo piece, Greater Tanuki can ramp you, you have the Bedeck Bedevil as removal, Push Pull as removal or another reanimation effect, and what you're trying to do is get to the point where either you cast Quintarius Canned or Trumpeting Carnosaur, and then it basically cascades you into Spark Doubles. That lets you keep casting either these cards or like copying them, either drain your opponent out, make a really big board. You could release the winds and then like, aka just fart, release the winds, and exile one of the permanents and then recast it again for free to kind of get some more value out of that. Quakebringer is the tech for anti-life gain against Amalia. Reduce Rubble. So it's your counter spell. This is like the hardest thing to read. Up to 3 target lands don't untap during their controller's end step. So mostly just as a counter spell. Thought Distortion for the control matchups. Virtue is more removal and aggro. Vanquish the Horde is kind of a reduced cost sweeper as well. That can be played. And then lastly, this one looks really sweet. It's Golgari Food List built around Insidious Roots. So first off, you never want to run into Farewell. That's the goal of the deck. No Farewell, please, 1 time. As well as Temporary Lockdown, please no 1 time. But with Roots, whenever a creature leaves your battlefield, you create a 0/1 plant, and you put a counter on each plant you control, and then your tokens can add a mana of any color so your creature tokens specifically. So you basically are getting cards out of your graveyard. Cat Oven counts as instances, so you get that value there. Gilded Goose kind of feeds you more food. There's Deathrite Shaman that you can eat away at the graveyard. You have the Tyvar, Priest of the Forgotten Gods kind of value engine. It gets haste, so you can activate it right away. Similarly with Insidious Roots. With the Tyvar out, you can tap for mana that same turn. Mosswood Dread Knight is a way to come out of your graveyard when it dies to kind of recast it from the Adventure Zone. Undead Butler mills you. When it dies, you can return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. So this is just leaves the graveyard. It doesn't have to like get exiled. It could go back to hand, stuff like that. The Tyvar, Vraska can also sack your tokens for value. So a lot of flexibility in the deck itself. You have Thoughtseize for hand hate. I would probably lean to play like a full set of Thoughtseize versus Control because you get wrecked by a couple key cards. Anti-life gain and Knight of Dusk Shadow, Graveyard hate. Terra Sunder, Artifact Enchantment hate, Hookah Sweepers. The Errasta is kind of interesting. It goes hard into Phoenix. I don't think you necessarily need 4. It's legendary, first off, and it still kind of gets hit by the same sweeper effects of Control. Doesn't make your stuff uncounterable. Massacre Girl as another kind of sweeper effect, and then Garruk for kind of the grindier matchups. I think Garruk's not really playable. I would probably trim on some of these, play another Ooze, and then play the full set of Thoughtseize. You may also want things like Go Blink. Just ways to kind of hit at your opponent. Having creatures are pretty good because you can hit them with Tyvar, but I don't think this is playable. It's too slow. It's 6 mana. There's probably better options like 5 mana or like Phyrexian Vraska could even be more reasonable. I'd probably even rather play Lulth just because it kind of plays into the theme of making creature tokens, provides you some card advantage as well in the grindier matchups. So that's it. Let me know what you think, how you've been finding the format, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.